When did you begin teaching steel pan and steel band? What inspired you to for how long have you been involved in steel pan and what drives you? So I first started teaching steel band when I was in grade 10. Um, as part of our school program, many of the band members take it upon themselves to teach the new members. So a lot of my initial teaching or experience in teaching happened when I was still at school, where I was teaching the younger students the repertoire of the senior school band. And I did this for at least up till when I completed my grade 12. Following that, the year thereafter, I immediately started assisting with the school steel band after I had completed my grade 12. This was in 2001. And while I was studying at varsity, I also ran a varsity steel band, a small varsity steel band for a couple of years at the university. But having the Graham College school steel band at my disposal allowed me to also develop my arranging. So often I would experiment with arranging, and I could bring those arrangements to the band at school, where they would then learn these, and we could see how I could learn how to improve on my arranging technique. After I had completed my studies, about 2 years afterwards, I was offered an occupational job to teach music at the school, and at which point I then took over the whole steel band program from Mrs. Vivian Haxley. A couple of years later, she retired, and I was running the steel band program by myself, which I have now done so for the last 12 years. So I initially started teaching the band in 2001, but formally took over the band in about 2010. And I've been running the program mostly by myself, although as I've said, a lot of the students that are in the band often assist me in teaching the younger students and the newer students. At the school, the program has been developed to accommodate 4 different groups, and with a 5th group being the students who are focusing on steel pan studies as part of their music subject. Who started the Graham College Steel Band? Where is it based? When and why? Walk us through the entire story behind the creation of the Graham College Steel Band. So the steel band started in 1996. Mrs. Vivian Haxley, the music teacher, was looking for an instrumental ensemble that could be used in the school. She, by coincidence, met up with Steve Laurie, who was the person making the instruments, and together they then started the steel band program in May of 1996. Steve would then come and teach the bands, while Mrs. Haxley was the coordinator and administrator of the band, because of being the music teacher at the school. The band is based in Makanda, in Grahamstown, in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, and it is one of the oldest school steel bands in existence in South Africa, with its existence now stretching to 26 years. So who is the current teacher of the Graham College Steel Band, and for how long? Who built the steel pans, and who is the band arranger? Talk us through your journey into becoming an esteemed steel band arranger. Walk us through the highlights of the steel band and why you do what you do. Walk us through a typical day in your steel band rehearsals? How do you run your bands? Do you follow a method or system? Walk us through your band schedule. Okay, so at present I am the teacher of the Glen College Steel Band. I run the whole program. My program consists of 4 different groups. Which focuses only on senior school. In the South African school system, the senior school is grade 8 up to grade 12, so only senior school learners. My beginner group consists of the grade 8 learners, of which I have roughly an intake every year of about 30. My grade 9 group is called the intermediate group. My grade 10 group is called the senior B group, and my grade 11 and 12s are then called the senior A groups. To get into the senior A groups, I would select from the senior B groups for any spaces that are available based on the grade 12s that would be leaving the school at the end of each year. My system is basically based on building technique from grade 8 up to grade 10. So in the grade 8 year, the focus is on learning the ability to play the instrument, learning technique, learning the rhythms. During the course of the year, the students would learn at most 3 or 4 arrangements, very basic arrangements. In grade 9, they start learning longer arrangements and would also learn maybe 3 to 4 different arrangements of various styles. My focus, as I said, in grade 8 and 9 is mostly on technique, developing the musicality, developing them as members of an ensemble. In grade 10, in the senior B group, they would then start learning most of the repertoire that would be involved in the senior A band. Here they start learning more complicated arrangements, learning to play with more tempo, and by the end of grade 10, most of those boys would then join the senior A band, where they already have a foundation of pieces that they can perform, but then new pieces that I arrange, and some of the boys that have been in my band have also arranged, they then bring those arrangements to the band, and we spend, depending on the difficulty of the pieces, the lessons learning those arrangements, and that is done during grade 11 and 12. The grade 8 group only has 1 rehearsal per week. The grade 9 group also only has 1, and the grade 10 also has 1. The grade 12 and 11 group, the senior A group, they have 2 rehearsals per week, but there is also a advanced or a special rehearsal for the lead instruments. The setup of our band is that most of our boys cannot read sheet music, and a lot of the music is taught to them by rote, to the point that the accompanying parts all have music in front of them that is written down in letter form with the sheet music, the proper sheet music. But the lead instruments don't use sheet music at all. And this is a technique that has been passed down from its very beginning when Steve Laurie was still teaching the band. So on one special rehearsal that we have is that the leads spend an extra half an hour to an hour just focusing once a week on the new pieces, the music of the new pieces. I do have a 5th group, and this is made up of the students that take music as a subject, especially those who are focusing on Steelpan as the instrument. And here, sheet music is used for all the parts without any letters being written. So the focus is on the students reading the music, and our focus mostly is on classical music, but we do try and incorporate different styles of music in that ensemble. That ensemble is also responsible for accompanying some of the ceremonies that are held, formal ceremonies that are held at the school, like the prize giving and the founders celebrations. So yeah, the school has given me that opportunity from when I started teaching at the school to develop my own arranging technique. Now, when Steve Laurie immigrated to the US at the end of 2000, he was kind enough to leave a very basic computer with me, which I still have in my possession, but it doesn't work anymore. I think the hard drive is backed up. But on this computer, I was able to use the sheet music programs Finale to start my first arrangements for Steelpan. And Steve Laurie had left all the arrangements he had done on the computer for me to study. So a lot of my initial arrangements were based on his technique in those arrangements that he had left. Following that, I then spent time with Andrew Tracy, learning arranging technique from him. And all these arrangements I was then able to pass on to the band, where I could experiment with different techniques and different styles of music using the school bands that were at my disposal. A lot of my inspiration also comes from the bands in Trinidad, the big bands. Some of my favorite bands that are in Trinidad, of course, is Renegades and Phase 2. I especially like Renegades, especially because that was actually the band that Steve Laurie had performed with when he was in Trinidad in 1994. There are various other groups that I have taken a liking to. The Association from France, the Northern Illinois University in Chicago, in the US, and also I enjoy the Codrington Pan Family ensemble. The music that they produce is inspiring to me and my arrangements. So it's often that I transcribe a lot of these bands' arrangements that we use in my own steel band. I do also do fresh arrangements that I have any idea that comes to mind, then I arrange it. But many of the arrangements that I have done have been transcriptions of bands that are performing that I can find recordings of or videos of online. What plans and inspirations do you have for the Grand College Steel Band going forward? So, depending on the groups, my groups go through various phases. I have, and I'm sure many other schools find this, that there are different levels of that can be attained with each group that passes through. So, basically, I have my students for 5 years, and only about 2, maybe 3 of those 5 years, grade 10, 11 and 12, I have time to focus on specific items with the groups. In the recent past, we have been going on tours, especially to Cape Town. So that is something that I would like to aspire to going on a tour again, mostly in South Africa. Although the school band has, under Mrs. Baxley's rectorship, on a tour to Portchester, England, in the UK in 2008. With the financial difficulty in South Africa, that will take us at least a year or 2, unless we get sponsorship, a year or 2 to raise funds for the band to actually go on an overseas tour, which is still a thought for me that I would like to do one day. But for now, tours in South Africa are feasible. We do participate in many festivals and competitions. What has been very useful is that we are able to do online competitions, virtual competitions, They've also participated in various virtual recordings, these being the International Virtual Performance of 2017, and also the virtual performances in the US and in New Zealand. And ambitions for my band by itself is to actually record a lot of the music that is present, video recordings or music videos of the band, and also participate in other competitions that are available to us. It does help us in our development. It helps us to strive and aim for a specific goal in what we're achieving. The band do perform regularly. On average, we have about 10 to 15 performances per year at various events and occasions. When the band was first started, and also was the only band, school band at the time, it would not be unusual for the band to have up to 30 or 40 performances for a year. So at present, 10 to 15 is quite a manageable amount of performances, given the activities that most of the members are involved with at school, other activities that they are participating in. In your honest opinion, describe the trajectory of the development of Steelpan in South Africa from the 1960s to present. So the Steelpan instrument when it first started, we had no Steelpan tuner in South Africa or maker. And so the only band for about 30 years, 20 years, was Andrew Tracy during the 1970s and 1980s. Once Steve Laurie had established himself as a band maker, and in the short space of less than 10 years, he had established school bands across the country for up to about 30, 50, maybe 50 schools that he had started steel band programs. And steel band was really flourishing during the early 90s. Many schools were looking for activities, especially in the development schools, to get music programs going or music ensembles going. Something that would be easy to teach, and this is where steel band just came to the fore. The difficulty at first, I'm sure, was that really it was a foreign instrument and little knowledge was known about how to teach it or how to write the music for it. But since then, there have been many people who have gained knowledge on this. The unfortunate thing, however, is that the country has been struggling to maintain the instruments that are in the country, and also to further develop the instrument, more instruments. At any given point in South Africa, during the last 20 years, there has only been one tuner. There have been a number of people who have studied steel pan making and tuning, but at present it looks as though there's only one steel pan tuner in the country, and it's difficult to find an active source for the instruments. It is also in direct competition with an instrument that is probably more suited to the culture of the country, which is the marimba instruments. These instruments are spread across the country, and they are easily maintained. Many people find it easier to play marimba than steel pan. And even in the Grade College music setup, we use marimbas for our grade 4 to 7 learners, just to gain, because it's slightly easier for them to learn the rhythmic technique on marimba and then pass on to steel band. Of course, the techniques, the actual playing technique is quite different on marimba than it is on steel band. So the difficulty has been that there's a lack of a tuner, and hopefully in time someone will take up this opportunity to become maybe 2 or 3 people will then be inspired, take this initiative and become a steel pan maker or tuner for the country. There are also financial difficulties in South Africa, the difficulties in finding material. It's very difficult to source steel drums in the country, although the modern technique is that you use sheet metal to craft your own drums to make the instruments, but therein lies the expense of the material, and for that to happen, the person also has to gain knowledge and experience in making these instruments, which will take some time.